Welcome to the Deep Dive. So lots of you have been talking about Adolescence, that Netflix series that just, well, blew up globally recently.
Well, topped the charts. And while critics seemed impressed,
It's the reaction from viewers, especially parents, that really jumped out at us. You shared some, well, really strong thoughts and analyses.
absolutely. And that's what we want to dig into today. Because adolescence, it hits differently, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not just another crime show.
Not at all. You start with the arrest, right? This 13-year-old boy, Jamie Miller, accused of murdering a classmate.
Which is shocking enough.
Exactly. But the show, it pivots pretty quickly. It's not really a whodunit. It becomes about the why. Why would a child do this?
And the way it's filmed.
Yeah.
That single continuous shot for each episode. Technically amazing.
Oh, definitely. It's technically dazzling, but it also, adds to that feeling of pressure of being trapped in the situation. Really effective.
So, looking at the reactions we got, several big themes kept coming up, things people really latched onto.
Yeah, things like the sheer reality of murder, obviously, but also misogyny, the influence of social media on kids.
Male rage, that came up a lot. And these online worlds, the manosphere, incel culture.
Right. These darker corners of the internet. It clearly struck a nerve because it feels, well, maybe a bit too close to home for some people.
It really does plug into some current anxieties, this fear that someone so young could get so radicalized online.
That they could actually commit violence.
Yeah.
Yeah, it raises huge questions about what's happening, maybe unseen online.
We also want to touch on something maybe a bit more subtle. The show depicts this idea of emojis as a kind of secret language for teens.
Yeah, that was an interesting detail, how kids communicate online in ways maybe adults don't pick up on.
Okay, so let's dive in. That opening scene. Jamie's arrest in his bedroom, it's abrupt.
Yeah, no easing you in, just bam, police in the kid's room. It's immediately unsettling.
That's a heavy tone right away.
It does, but like we said, the focus shifts pretty fast from just the crime itself.
Right, it's not about finding clues in the traditional sense.
No, it becomes about exploring what could possibly lead a 13-year-old, a child, really to commit such an act of violence. It's deeply uncomfortable territory.
Which loops back to that idea of online radicalization. That was a huge point in the feedback, wasn't it? Could this actually happen?
It's a scary thought. And commentators pointed out something interesting, how media consumption has changed.
How so?
Well, think about older generations. Maybe you watch TV together or a specific movie. But now, a kid like Jamie can be totally immersed online, alone.
Right, in their own bubble, for hours.
Exactly. Unsupervised, potentially absorbing all sorts of content. That's a very different dynamic than, say, 30 years ago.
And it's not just passive watching, is it? It's the algorithm.
Yes, the algorithms. That's key. They're designed to keep you engaged. Right?
Yeah, feed you more of what grabs your attention.
And sometimes that means leading you down rabbit holes towards more and more extreme stuff. It creates these echo chambers.
Where these, harmful ideas can start to seem normal.
Precisely. Because that's all you're seeing. It reinforces certain viewpoints, maybe dangerous ones. This constant tailored exposure. It's powerful.
And that ties into what people were calling male rage and this whole manosphere thing.
It connects directly. These online spaces can amplify feelings of resentment or anger, which leads us to incel culture.
Incel.
Yeah.
And voluntarily celibate. It's a term with a surprisingly neutral origin, apparently.
Yeah, originally coined by a woman in Canada, just describing feeling isolated, lacking romantic connections. Nothing inherently sinister there.
But it shifted dramatically, especially after 2014, Elliot Rodger.
Exactly. That was a turning point. The term got co-opted and twisted within certain online communities. Now, it's often associated with, well, quite extreme beliefs.
Like what specifically?
Often a belief in male superiority, coupled with intense anger and blame directed at women for the men's perceived failures in dating or sex.
A real sense of victimhood and injustice fueling it.
Yes, a deep sense of grievance. And unfortunately, as the show explores, and tragically real life shows, that anger can sometimes spill over into real-world violence.
And the algorithms we mentioned, they can push vulnerable people deeper into this.
They can certainly accelerate it. If someone shows interest in this kind of content, the platform might keep suggesting more, reinforcing those harmful ideas, creating a community almost.
And commentators drew lines between the show and actual cases, right?
They did. Names like Ava White, Ilan Adam, Nicholas Prosper, Axel Ruda Cabana came up, all tragic cases involving young people, often stabbings. It highlights that the show, while fiction, is touching on very real, very current fears.
There was also the mention of Carl Clifford, the Andrew Tate connection there before the murders. Chilling.
It really underscores the potential impact of this kind of online influence. These aren't just abstract ideas, they can have devastating real-world consequences.
Raises big questions about responsibility, doesn't it? Parents, platforms, society.
Absolutely. Where does responsibility lie? It's complex.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly, but stay online. The emojis. The secret language idea in the show. Is that a real thing?
It actually reflects something real, yeah. Maybe not a fully formed secret language across all teens, but definitely within specific online groups or subcultures.
How does that work?
Well, these groups, sometimes quite insular, sometimes extremist, develop their own shorthand. It can be emojis, memes, specific phrases, things that look innocent to an outsider.
But have a totally different meaning inside the group.
Exactly. It builds identity, reinforces belonging, and sometimes allows them to communicate under the radar, away from parents or authorities who wouldn't get the reference.
And the show used specific examples linked to incel culture. I think the pill, dynamite.
Yes, those were mentioned in the commentary around the show, the pill emoji, often referencing the red pill idea.
Which is like an awakening to their version of reality.
Sort of. In those circles, it often means buying into ideas about male dominance and blaming women for men's issues. It's a core concept for them.
And the dynamite.
That can symbolize, like, wanting to blow up societal norms, things they see as unfair or degenerate, disrupting the status quo.
What about the 100% of the bean?
Those are apparently linked to a specific incel belief, often called the 80-20 rule, the idea that 80% of women pursue only the top 20% of men. The emojis are shorthand for that concept within the group.
Wow. It's kind of disturbing how everyday symbols get twisted like that.
It really is. And the important thing is context. Emojis are this constantly evolving language used differently everywhere.
Right. The feedback also mentioned other uses, like for drugs or bullying.
Exactly. So it's not just about incel culture. Different peer groups use them in countless ways. It just highlights that hidden meanings can exist and maybe requires a bit more awareness of context.
Okay, so moving into episode 3 of Adolescence, the focus shifts heavily onto the forensic psychologist assessing Jamie.
Yes, this is where the show really digs deep into the why, trying to understand his psychology, his motivations, what might be going on inside his head.
And legally, for context, a 13-year-old in England. They can be held criminally responsible, right?
Yes, the age of criminal responsibility there is 10. So Jamie, at 13, falls well within that. Detention for that age group would typically be in what's called a secure training center.
Which is different from a prison for older teens.
Generally, yes. STCs have a stronger focus on rehabilitation, education, addressing the underlying issues, more therapeutic in theory.
And the assessment we see the psychologist doing, it's pretty involved.
Oh, definitely. It's not just a chat. They're observing his behavior, his reactions.
And looking at CCTV footage.
Gathering information from everyone, teachers, families, social workers, trying to piece together a full picture, and assessing specific things like his anger management, his thinking patterns.
And the psychologist's role here, they're an expert witness, right? What does that actually mean in practice?
It means their main duties to the court, not to the side that hired them. They need to provide an impartial, objective opinion based on their expertise.
So even if the defense pays them, they have to be neutral.
Ethically, yes. Their job is to help the court understand the psychological aspects of the case, based on the facts available. Honesty and objectivity are paramount.
And in the interviews themselves, Jamie's behavior, it changes, doesn't it?
It does. He starts off quiet, maybe withdrawn, but then you see defensiveness creep in, anger, even paranoia.
And he seems really focused on how he's coming across.
Very much so. Preoccupied with his image, how the psychologist perceives him, which is revealing in itself.
The psychologist also tries to understand his views on masculinity, asking about his dad, his granddad.
Right, trying to get a sense of the male influences in his life, beyond just, say, online figures. Recognizing that our ideas about gender roles come from many places.
And they touch on these psychological ideas.
Yeah.
Transference and countertransference. Can you break those down simply?
Sure. Basically, transference is when Jamie might unconsciously project feelings or attitudes from past relationships, maybe with parents or other authority figures, onto the psychologist.
Okay, so he reacts to the psychologist as if they were someone else from his past.
In a way, yes. And countertransference is the psychologist's own emotional reaction to Jamie. Maybe feelings Jamie evokes in them. It's all part of the complex emotional dynamic in the room.
Gives the psychologist clues, maybe?
It can offer insights into Jamie's internal world and how he relates to people, absolutely.
Some of the things Jamie actually says in these sessions are quite stark.
Definitely. Dismissing school sports, admitting he lies easily, and his comments about the victim.
Yeah, calling her a slag, but then saying he wanted her when she seemed weak. It's disturbing.
Very. And his description of the night itself. Crucially, there seems to be a real lack of empathy for the victim. That's often a significant factor in these assessments.
And is the psychologist also figuring out if he's even fit to stand trial?
Yes, that's part of it. Assessing fitness to plead. Does he understand the charges? Know the difference between pleading guilty or not guilty? Can he follow the trial? Instruct his lawyers? Basic comprehension of the legal process.
That final session shown. It ends quite powerfully. Jamie seems angry, but also vulnerable.
Yes, you see cracks in the facade. Anger, but also this raw vulnerability, maybe a need for reassurance, even asking about his parents, but indirectly.
Like a scared kid underneath it all?
Perhaps. It suggests a deeply damaged individual. And you see the psychologist reflecting on that, the anger, the vulnerability, the toll these cases take.
It really highlights the human cost, even for the professionals involved.
It does. These are incredibly difficult, emotionally taxing situations.
So looking back at the series as a whole, that technical skill, the single takes, is undeniable.
Absolutely. It's a filmmaking feat. But its real strength, I think, is how it refuses to give easy answers.
Right. It doesn't neatly explain everything away or assign simple blame.
No, it just lays bare these complex, uncomfortable issues and forces you to grapple with them. It raises the questions powerfully, but leaves the answers, hanging.
Which is probably more realistic, ultimately.
Probably, yeah. It generates conversation, makes you think, which seems to be exactly what it did based on the reactions we saw.
So wrapping up this deep dive on adolescence, what are the main takeaways?
Well, I think it underscores the really complex mix of factors that might play into youth violence. It's rarely just one thing.
And the huge, maybe hidden impact of online radicalization, that feels key.
Definitely. And also how communication itself is changing online. The potential for hidden meanings, like with the emojis, the challenges in really understanding and maybe intervening effectively.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. Which leads us to a final thought, maybe something for listeners to ponder.
Cool.
Given everything adolescence brings up, what responsibility do different parts of society actually bear here? Parents, schools, the tech platforms themselves, peers. How do we collectively address these issues?
That's a big question. No easy answers there either, I guess.
Not at all. It's tangled, requires nuance, but maybe a necessary conversation to keep having.
Absolutely. Well, if this discussion has intrigued you, maybe check out Adolescence if you haven't, or just keep thinking about these important themes. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.